Hi there. I've been involved with photography now for a very long time. I guess serious photography probably since about 1980. That's a lot of years. Most of those years, of course, I shot film. Most of those years, I used something like this. This is my old K1000 that served me very well for a very long time. Would I want to go back to this again? Well, for nostalgia reasons, there are many reasons why I might want to. Notice that this has on it a 50mm f2 lens. Nice lens, very simple, fast enough, very sharp. And of course, the body itself has all of the traditional controls, as I pointed out in the Fuji video that I did earlier. So, why would I not want to go back to this? Simple. I've learned more about photography in the years since, 2005, I got my first digital SLR. So, in the last 11 years, I have learned more about photography than I did in the 25 years before that. And the reason is simple. Now I'm getting feedback. This is what I use now. It has a less traditional control layout because, of course, it is an electronic camera. They could have gone with a more traditional system, as Fuji has, but they chose not to. However, it is fairly intuitive, and I've learned the little quirks about it. Thanks to this on the back, I get some feedback as to what I've done with my photography. I get a chance to make changes on the fly. I get the chance to learn. Learning is not a process of trial and success. It's called trial and error for good reason. We learn from the mistakes we make and how to fix those mistakes. So, here's my advice. For all those people who want to go out there and relive the glory days of film, or who claim that film was the only true photographic medium, my advice to you is simple. If you really want the photographic experience of film, if you take this, you will be able to find a camera body very cheap. You will be able to find most lenses at a reasonable price. But then you'll have to deal with the cost of film and developing, and the weight, and the fact that the only feedback you get is possibly weeks later when you get your film developed and printed. The result? This is a nice conversation piece. It is a nice diversion at times. It's nice to throw a roll of film in this every now and then and go out and shoot. However, if you want the experience, if you want to get away from the spray and pray attitude that so many people have about digital, then here's the thing. When I started around 1980, that's when zoom lenses were only just beginning to show some promise. They'd been around for a while, but the quality had been not good. The result was everybody used primes. So one of the things that film photographers like to brag about is the fact that they are using prime lenses. So take your digital SLR, put a prime lens on it. This right here is a 35mm f2. Now it is as close an equivalent as I can get for an APS-C camera to my 50mm f2 I was using in the film days. So, close lens. Number two, use small memory cards. Get away from these, 64 gigabyte cards. They allow you to shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and really not think much about what you're shooting. This camera can shoot somewhere around 7-8 frames per second. So if I put a big card in here and I put it on the green setting here, which of course is everything automatic, if I put it there and then I set it for, let's see, on the back here, I can set it then for multiple frames. And what will I have now? I have a machine gun. The trouble with my machine gun is that I'm just going to get lots and lots and lots of pictures that I'm going to have to wade through afterwards and try and see if there was anything in there worth keeping. By using a small card, one article I read, this photographer actually used a 4 gigabyte card in a fairly high resolution camera. He could get about 100 shots on it. He liked that because he said that's about the equivalent of 3 rolls of film. And 3 rolls of film would have been a reasonable shoot in his film days. So what's he doing? He is replicating that in his digital camera. So he knows he can't go out and just shoot at everything. He has to think before he shoots. The other thing, the argument about RAW versus JPEG will always be around. What does that have to do with this? Well, if you like processing, if you like going through the process of taking your RAW file and fixing it, and if you want the best possible quality from your images, then of course shoot RAW. Shooting RAW is, I guess, the digital equivalent of shooting negative film, print film, back in the film days, because there was a certain amount of latitude, exposure latitude, and you could adjust the image in the printing process. Shooting JPEGs is kind of like what shooting slide film was. Slide film was unforgiving. It's the exposure, its exposure tolerance was no more than a stop one way or the other. The result is that you either blew out the highlights or blocked up the shadows if you weren't very careful, and you had no adjustment afterwards. Well, with JPEGs you get a tiny bit of adjustment, but not much. So that's your choice. If you want to have the experience of shooting slide film, then go ahead, shoot JPEG. Be careful. Make sure you do everything properly. And remember, you're not going to recover anything if you lose it. If you just want the best possible images, then of course shoot in RAW. That way you can use Lightroom or any other RAW processing package that gives you a reasonable amount of control to adjust the image and make it into what you imagined it should be in the first place. Now, of course, we do have the extremes. Leica, of course, has their 2 rather extreme cameras. One is the model that has no screen on the back and no menus, and basically you just set the ISO and the exposure and use it like a film camera. It's very expensive and it's kind of hit and miss. The other Leica specialty item is their camera that shoots only black and white. Now, the result is, theoretically, that it would be sharper because it does not have to deal with a bare matrix. That is that matrix of red, green, and blue that you find in front of the sensor that allows it to record color. But again, that's a little extreme. If you want to do that, most cameras you can set to do that. Meanwhile, as I said, my advice, stick in a small memory card, go out, shoot thoughtfully, use a prime lens so that you actually will be thinking about your composition more rather than standing in one spot and zooming in and out to get something. And learn from your mistakes. Trial and error. I hope this has been helpful, and so long for now. Bye. By the way, when I said use a prime lens, that was not meant to say don't use a zoom. If all you have is a zoom, then go with it. But it's good practice to actually just set it at one focal length and try getting the images you want just at that focal length until you've learned what it will do for you. Then go to another focal length. That way you're getting the experience and the learning process of prime lenses without having to go out and spend any extra money. Anyhow, this little addition is just a little something to clarify what could have been a confusing point.